We need to let folks in.
Song of the Open Road. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me. Henceforth, I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune. Strong and content, I travel the open road. I inhale great draughts of space. The east and the west are mine, and the north and the south are mine. All seems beautiful to me. I can repeat over to men and women, you have done such good to me, I would do the same to you. Whoever you are, come travel with me. However sweet these laid-up stores, however convenient this dwelling, we cannot remain here. However sheltered this port, and however calm these waters, we must not anchor here. Together, the inducements shall be greater. We will sail pathless and wild seas. We will go where winds blow, waves dash, and the Yankee clipper speeds by under full sail. Forward, after the great companions, and to belong to them. They, too, are on the road. Onward to that which is endless, as it was beginningless, to undergo much, tramps of days, rests of nights, to see nothing anywhere but what you may reach it and pass it. To look up or down, no road, but it stretches and waits for you. To know the universe itself as a road, as many roads, as roads for traveling souls.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go down and lie where the woodthread rests in its beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
What's it all about, Alfie? Is it just for the moment we live? What's it all about when we sort it out, Alfie? Are we meant to take more than we give, or are we meant to be kind? And if only fools are kind, Alfie, then I guess it is wise to make and if life belongs only to the strong, Alfie,
Good morning and welcome. My name is Oles Karianis, and I'm the field education student here at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. As always, a big thank you to the entire team that helps bring services to life each Sunday. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been gathering in community as a home for liberal faith and free thinking. Now, as much as ever, we need communities like this that believe in the interdependence of humanity, in the power of love, and in the holy spark in every single person. Here, in this community, we celebrate each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, physical or mental health, or theology. If this is your first time visiting one of our Sunday services, we are so glad that you found us and welcome. Please consider staying for our virtual coffee hour. It's a great way to connect with small groups of folks. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out the Google form that will be dropped into the chat or email our office at 113cottage@gmail.com. That's 113cottage@gmail.com, or visit our website, uuridgewood.org. If you have been joining us a while and are curious about membership and want to take the next steps toward it, please contact Ann Peretti at usr.membership1@gmail.com. This month on the Reeb porch, we are collecting diapers that we will distribute through the Women's Club of Ridgewood. Diapers are a necessity and can be extremely expensive for folks experiencing poverty or homelessness. Domestic violence shelters, as well as other shelters, always need diaper donations. Please consider adding a pack or two to your next shopping trip and drop it by Reeb porch. Help us continue to help others during these challenging times. We are so glad that you are with us this morning.
Please join us in the words for lighting the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
Now come, take a deep breath. The cold persists as we long for warmth and springtime. In some places, snow still sparkles on the ground. Everywhere, we still contend with trials and challenges. Breathe deeply and listen. Let this sound remind you that always hope rings out. Truth finds a way. The future can yet be made. Our fates are not sealed. The cold will not last forever. We are writing the story still. Take a deep breath and listen. This morning, I offer you words by Kenneth Patton, erstwhile minister of the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. In this reading, though Reverend Patton used the word house, I feel certain he referred not to the building, but to the community created by the gathered people. He wrote, "This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature. It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle. It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person. It offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion. It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics can abide in a community of searchers. It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks. It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present in visions of growth and progress. This house is a cradle for our dreams, the workshop of our common endeavor. I have always particularly loved the line, a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present in visions of growth and progress. I don't know how well we do it, but it's something to which we aspire, and it is something I think about often. And it is what we consider together today. Who are we? What is this thing we share in, this Unitarian Universalism? What will it be if we take seriously visions of growth and progress and we outrun the past and even the present? Today, we look backwards to vision forwards. We breathe deeply as we imagine with fear and excitement what the future holds. We open our minds to ideas that have yet to take shape, and we open our hearts to living in the uncertainty with hope and commitment.
Our readings this morning come from Widening the Circle of Concern. It's a report that was prepared and released by the UUA Commission on Institutional Change in 2020. So, as per the document, quote, at the New Orleans General Assembly in 2017, the UUA Board of Trustees announced and chartered the Commission on Institutional Change. The charge was to conduct an audit of the power structures and analyze systemic racism and white supremacy culture within the Unitarian Universalist Association. So Widening the Circle of Concern is the result of that work. This morning, our first reading is the beginning of the section titled Trends, and our second reading is the end of that same section. So a link to the full report will be placed in the chat should you wish to do a deeper dive and read through it. The world around us is different than it was a decade ago, or even 5 years ago. The question is, how will our living tradition keep up with the times? What choices will we make or fail to make? And how will that affect the relevancy and the survival of our faith? Here are some of the realities in which our faith exists as we enter into 2020. Our nation is moving away from institutional religion. And Unitarian Universalism is not immune. We too are losing congregations and have many teetering on the edge of collapse. While we typically refer to 1,000 congregations, in truth, we now have around 819 congregations that would meet the standard to become a congregation today. As institutional religion declines, more who enter our doors are not refugees from other faiths, but are experiencing faith communities for the first time through our faith and are seeking spiritual ground. The racial demographics of our nation have changed, and with them expectations around cultural competency. New generations face a much bleaker economic and environmental future than those who are now at the end of their careers or in retirement. So in the face of these trends, we face some critical divides among us. Since the mid-20th century, more Unitarian Universalists are come-inners than birthright Unitarian Universalists. Many of those who came in during the 1960s through the 1980s were interested in getting away from religious practices that they felt were non-rational, demeaning, or illogical. The attraction of our faith was what it was not, non-creedal, non-hierarchical. and the emphasis was on personal freedom. In recent decades, more of those entering our doors have been attracted by our beliefs, and their interest has been in the tenets of our faith. Some among us believe that we can continue the practices that have been most prevalent in Unitarian Universalism without change. Others feel it is critical for us to change. Many of these tend to be younger or identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or hold other identities that are marginalized in the UU community, such as gender expansive. Some believe that work to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity is optional and tangential to our faith. Others believe it is a form of spiritual practice among us necessary to live out our faith.
Good morning. My name is Helen Matasoers, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Part of laying the groundwork for the future of our congregation is making our weekly offering that helps to sustain the work of this community. We know that we benefit from those who have gone before, generations of folks just like us who believed in community, in justice, in transformation, and in the healing power of love. They gave so that we might today belong to and build this supportive and sustaining community. Generations after us will still need to fight for liberation and equality for all. They will still need to provide their children with experiences that help them grow into themselves. They will still need a place to go, to be reminded of their highest aspirations and affirmed in their wholeness. Our giving now ensures the future of this congregation for years to come. This community exists because of you, and it will survive because of you. Your passion, your time, your talents, and also your donations. Whatever you are able to give, we are thankful for your generosity. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I want to, before we move into the meditation, make a special plea for contributions to the Unitarian Universalist Association's trauma response to Texas. We realize that there is ongoing work of healing and rebuilding, and it is important that when we are able, we share what we can with others, because one day we will find ourselves the ones in need of support. We will put into the chat a link to the ways to support the UUA's efforts to send support and care to Texas. So please, as you are able, you can make those contributions as well. And now if you'll take a deep breath. Every Sunday that we gather, we take time in our service to be together in silence, to bear witness to each other's lives, to the joys and sorrows that weave together and make up our human existence. Please join me now in this special time. Settle your body as comfortably as you can. Take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. Take another deep breath. As we breathe deeply together and come into this moment, I want to share with you that USR congregant Steve Nellison died on Friday night. A beloved member, father, husband, and bridge aficionado, Steve will be sorely missed. He leaves behind his wife, Amy, and their two daughters, April and Emily, along with countless others whose lives he touched. We will keep you informed of memorial plans. This morning, though, please take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, send thoughts of love, care, and support to Steve's family. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Roll your shoulders back. Let your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth and unclench your jaw. If it feels comfortable and safe, I invite you to close your eyes and just be here in these moments of companionable quiet, assured of the community that holds you, assured of the love that is yours. As we ask ourselves where we come from, who we are, where we are going, we remember that the past has lessons to teach. If we are able to find them, embrace them, and let go of what does not serve. We remember that our questions, while filled with mystery, are also filled with promise. Take a deep breath. As we come to the year-long anniversary of this COVID pandemic that has changed all our lives, we are mindful of the losses we have endured. We are mindful of the unbelievable commitment and heroism of so many. We are mindful of the relentless trauma that has defined this time and that will continue to define a generation. Take a deep breath. As we ache and grieve and wonder and worry, we are also aware that in amongst the challenge, there is hope. There is the possibility for change and for a future brighter than the past we have known, if only we have the strength to vision it and to move into that future. We are aware that our hearts and minds and bodies can be turned to the good. Love can pour forth from us in service of justice and community, and the future can still be made. Take a deep breath. There is challenge, yes, but we are in it together. With each breath in, remember that you are not alone. With each breath out, let yourself rest in the possibilities before us. Breathe and be here now. May you breathe in the love of your community and hope for the future each and every day, no matter how far apart we are. So may it be.
Please join in singing our hymn, Where Do We Come From? Number 1003. This is a round and there are 4 parts, so join in whenever you're ready. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery. What are we? Life is a riddle. Where do we come from? Mystery. What are we? Life is a riddle. Where do we come from? Mystery. Life is a riddle. Where do we come from? Life is a riddle.
Our second reading continues the trends section of that report from the Commission on Institutional Change. What puts extra pressure on these divides? A number of factors increase the tension and division. Since the early decades of the 20th century, we have not invested in developing the theological resources that could have allowed us to have a vocabulary of faith to meet these troubling times. Our faith, as with almost all institutions in our nation, rests on a culture whose economic structures depend on the annihilation of indigenous peoples and the enslavement of Africans forcibly relocated and enslaved. Despite periodic and episodic attempts to address this legacy and to address personal bias, we have not sustained these efforts and now find many of our congregational practices lacking in the standards of multicultural competency found in many workplaces. Our overemphasis on hyper-individualism and the legacy of the consolidation of Unitarian and Universalism have led to a culture of mistrust that is augmented when difference is in play. Women and gay, lesbian, bisexual, gender expansive, and disabled adults have all struggled, as have Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color who have sought to lend their gifts. We do not have effective ways of dealing with conflict, tending to avoid it until it explodes. These explosions are then often covered up. This conflict avoidant culture is now dangerous in an age of new interpersonal norms and the magnifying impacts of social media. In consideration of these trends, we say, in a world where people can understand more about one another because of the way the internet allows us to enter one another's lives, cultural competency is increasingly expected. Our theological legacy has long put us on the forefront of advocacy and prophetic action to widen the circle of concern for marginalized groups. And yet, without a focus on addressing today's issues of inclusion, we are woefully unprepared to live our values. We have spent time comparing our religious wounds rather than healing them. As a result, we have often operated from a least common denominator approach, rather than one linked to our highest values as a people of faith. Our time as a haven or social club for those disaffected by other religions has passed. In these searing times of political division, climate change, economic polarization, and global strife, people need a sustaining faith. Economic and demographic trends alone would require us to look anew at efforts to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity. And we also have a theological imperative to do so. We continue to attract a greater diversity of people and to retain a very small percentage of those who do not match the resourced, white, aging majority within our congregations. We witness a growing and cavernous gap between generations, exacerbated by lack of investment in technologies and methodologies that can help us understand and better comprehend generational differences. As with other predominantly white institutions, we have failed to acknowledge the extent to which the resources that have built our institutions were amassed at the expense of people of color, especially Indigenous and Black people. The unfinished and interrupted work on race within Unitarian Universalism has marred our ability to move forward at a time when accountability, multicultural awareness, and inclusive language are becoming the new normal in the larger world. Engagement in this type of development is deep spiritual and faithful work that allows for growth and change. We need change at the personal and interpersonal levels, and most of all, we need to make systemic changes that can be ongoing and lasting. The newer generations in our nation are increasingly at risk, according to many reports, including the 2019 World Happiness Report, which singled out a dramatic and disturbing decline in health and happiness, especially for younger US citizens. Our deliberations to date have convinced us of this. What is at stake is nothing less than the future of our faith.
Will There Really Be a Morning by Emily Dickinson. Will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? Could I see it from the mountains if I were as tall as they? Has it feet like water lilies? Has it feathers like a bird? Is it brought from famous places of which I have never heard? Oh, some scholar, oh, some sailor, some wise men from the skies, please to tell a little pilgrim where the place called morning lies. Could I see it from where the place called morning lies.
One of the well-known stories from the Hebrew scriptures is that of David and Goliath. I'm guessing many of you remember it. Saul and the Israelites are facing an army of Philistines. The two encampments sit across from each other, and each morning, a giant of a man named Goliath comes out to the line and shouts defiantly at the Israelites, asking for a man to fight. Days upon days go by like this. And finally, a young man named David, who's been sent to bring supplies to his brothers who are in the army, asks around about the situation. He gets taken to Saul, and David offers to fight the giant Philistine. Saul scoffs, but David assures him that his experience tending the flock back home and fending off lions and bears makes him just the man for the job. Saul gives over his own armor and weaponry, but when David tries it on, it doesn't feel right. He declares he can't use it as he isn't used to it, and instead he picks up his shepherd's staff, his sling, and he locates 5 smooth stones, which he puts in his pouch. And out he marches. The Philistine unsurprisingly laughs at David, but David invokes his Lord, runs toward Goliath, places 1 smooth stone in his sling and lets it fly. And he strikes Goliath right between the eyes, and down the giant falls. David is triumphant. The Philistine army disperses, and David is brought before Saul to receive accolades and gifts. The story, of course, gets told over and over, invoked time and time again as the quintessential underdog story. Against all odds, the young shepherd boy, unarmored, unarmed, fells the experienced warrior. The mythology is powerful, ancient, and a time-tested way of inspiring and creating hope. We Unitarian Universalists have at times cast ourselves as the underdog. We are a small denomination, 1,000 or thereabouts congregations across the United States and Canada, some sprinkled through the rest of the world. We understand ours as an uphill battle against the entrenched religions of history. And certainly we understand our path as one away from static religious thinking or stagnant religious community. This positioning makes sense. Historically, the ideas that inspired our 2 religious antecedents were heresies. In many centuries, the beliefs we inherit were punishable by death. The Unitarian view that God was singular, that the Trinity was not scriptural, that Jesus was not co-eternal with God, not even uniquely God's self. These were heresies disallowed from the time of the Council of Nicaea in 325. The Universalists' view that God was too loving to ever condemn any creation to an eternity of torment, that universal salvation would be given to all people no matter what they had done. This too was a heresy disallowed from the early medieval period. Of course, it is worth noting that both were interpretive options available in the earliest days after Jesus's death. Only with institutionalization, with conformity and canonization did these alternative ways of understanding the life of Jesus, the nature of God, and cosmology become anathema. These heresies rose again in 19th century America with figures like William Ellery Channing, whose sermon, Unitarian Christianity, in 1819, defined for centuries what Unitarian meant. Channing established the use of reason in scriptural interpretation and religious thought, and from there he proclaimed God's unity, Jesus's full humanity, the goodness of God, and Jesus's life as one of moral example, not salvation. Then there was Hosea Ballou, who preached a doctrine of universal salvation centered around God's love, regardless of our human error, and whose work, Treatise on Atonement from 1805, centered human experience and the humanly driven nature of morality and immorality. In 1841, Theodore Parker delivered his foundational sermon, The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity. This sermon declared that in religion there is the eternal permanent truth, that is God's, and the changing transient truth that is humanity's. What was true, what was pure, what was moral, what was permanent, Parker argued, was loving humanity, loving God. The message of Jesus, of religion, was to cultivate salvation through love in our own hearts and thus change the world. These foundational theologians and preachers left a legacy that the 20th century took up. James Luther Adams wrote of what he called the 5 smooth stones of liberal religion, hearkening back to that David and Goliath story. These are the weapons, if we want to use that word, that we have in our liberal religious journey, said James Luther Adams. Adams was a parish minister, a professor, and a prolific author. A brief essay contained within the larger work on being human religiously encapsulates what is different about religious liberalism, what sets it apart from theologically, culturally, or behaviorally conformist notions of religion. The first stone, he writes, is that meaning has not been fully captured. What he means is what we often say here: nothing is finished, nothing is over. Put in other words, revelation is continuous. The result of this, though, is that everything can be critiqued, new information can always be incorporated, things are not complete. We are unfolding, existence is unfolding. We are growing and changing and journeying on. The second stone is that, quote, relations between persons ought ideally to rest on mutual, free consent and not on coercion. Loyalty and conviction should be freely given, not coerced, not forced. We're free to determine whether or not we want to walk alongside each other. We are free to determine what meaning to make out of the unfolding of our lives and this world, and we can covenant to make that meaning in each other's company. The third, that we are obligated morally to work, quote, toward the establishment of a just and loving community. This community we seek is human, exists in time and space, and it is an, quote, achievement of freedom with respect to material resources, as well as with respect to spiritual resources. It isn't enough to live by the Spirit, Adams wrote, one must do. It isn't enough to have faith in a world to come, one must make this world just and loving by our actions, our gifts, and our living. The fourth smooth stone, that organization makes possible the establishment of the loving community. Intentional, organized social behavior. He writes, quote, no one can properly put faith in merely individual virtue, even though that is a prerequisite for societal virtues. The faith of the liberal must express itself in societal forms. Without these, freedom and justice in community are impossible. Faith is only worthwhile, we can say, only good, adequate, he writes, if it leads one to give time and energy to changing politics, changing society, changing education. We must organize power, because it is through the human exercise of organized power that we actually accomplish change. The fifth stone, put simply, is optimism. The idea that available to all of us are resources. JLA, as he is affectionately known, says there are human and divine resources that justify seeing the universe unfolding in a positive way if we each do our part. It's not a blind optimism, he says, but maybe a willful optimism. He writes that, quote, with all the realism and tough-mindedness that can be mustered, the genuine liberal finally can hear and join in the Hallelujah chorus. Intellectual integrity, social relevance, amplitude of perspective, and the spirit of liberation offer no less. My colleague, the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, sums up the 5 smooth stones of James Luther Adams with one word for each. Reverend Lorenzen encapsulates them as evolution, freedom, justice, agency, and hope. When I consider these 5 smooth stones, these tools we carry in our quest for liberal religious freedom and for a changed world, when I think about those who came before and who laid the groundwork for this thing we share called Unitarian Universalism, I think about what I believe the 5 smooth stones to be now. We live in a different world than the mid-20th century one that James Luther Adams was writing in. And while some things are permanent, that baseline of love and unity that Channing, Ballou, and Parker wrote of, while some things are permanent, our reason and our forebears also teach us that the human experience changes. And the way that we speak about the ineffable, the way that we make meaning, the way that we live changes. JLA's first point is that revelation doesn't stop. And we have had revealed in the waning decades of the 20th century and these first 2 decades of the 21st century, some hard and very real truths. We have had revealed to us, though it came as no surprise to billions of people the world over, that racism and oppression are alive and well. We have had revealed to us, though it came as no surprise to billions of people the world over, that the human experience of identity and gender and sexuality is wildly vast. We have had revealed to us, though it came as no surprise to billions of people the world over, that our treatment of this earth is damaging the one home we know. We have had revealed to us, though it came as no surprise to billions of people the world over, that unchecked capitalism creates deeper and deeper economic divides. We have had revealed to us so much more about what this being human really is, what it means and what it offers. Revelation does not stop, and our response to revelation cannot stop if we are to remain relevant, if we are to outrun the past and the present with visions of the future. Our forebears were wise in their time, and much of their wisdom persists and will do so down generations. But we do not believe in static thought, stagnant belief, or stale modes of experiencing and seeking the truth. Ours is a living tradition, a living religion that asks us to grow and never take for granted any particular aspect of our humanity or our human experience. When I think about this call to growth, I think about the decades since JLA wrote his words that many of us hold so dear. Unitarian Universalism has gone through shifting alignments. At one point, identifying more strongly with humanism, eschewing language of reverence, and leaning more toward atheism and agnosticism. For some, that alignment may have felt like the culmination of the evolution of Unitarian Universalism from Jesus-oriented, God-embracing religions to a reason-based, atheistic, and humanist tradition. For others, this felt like a move from one dogma to another. And we have seen nudges back across the denomination. This had already begun during the time that I was being formed as a minister. Nudges away from identification with any one particular theology. And yes, we can argue that atheism is a theology, if we understand theology to be the consideration of and the determination on the existence of a divine being. Nudges toward understanding ourselves as not aligning doctrinally with any one particular vision of God or not God or the cosmos. These nudges worked to make space again for words like prayer, worship, God, words that carry sometimes painful connotations for some folks, but that also carry deep and abiding meaning for others. More than the re-inclusion of words, though, these moves away from perfect mapping onto 20th century humanism have meant that Unitarian Universalism has reaffirmed its commitment to being non-dogmatic, non-creedal, and to embracing a variety of theological positions. These moves toward what we might call a theological big tent have meant that UUism is no longer considered synonymous with humanism or atheism. But it has also meant that our driving concerns are no longer so perfectly mapped onto that classic American idolization of the individual, of progress, and of consumption. We've begun moves away from reason for reason's sake, away from prioritizing the individual will of each person, away from glorifying certain cultural norms. Still, always and ever, reason, science, our direct human experience will be considered foundational to our Unitarian Universalist way of viewing the world. But now, in this new century, we have come to understand some new things, including that the Goliath against which we arm ourselves with our smooth stones is not simply an external Goliath. Rather, the enemies of material greed, individualism, rigidity, lack of theological imagination, the enemies of complacency and comfort and oppression confront us both from without and from within. We've come to understand this truth through reason, science, and direct experience. It's the wisdom of those who came before that has helped us to be open to the ongoing revelation that has given us ever deeper knowledge. The world is not what it was 100 years ago or even 50. We are not who we were, though some things remain. I might, at the risk of being wildly impertinent, I might then posit a new set of smooth stones, drawing from the forebears who shaped us, but attempting to live into the truth of our lives and to prophecy for the future. The first, change. We have a deep understanding and appreciation for the reality and the gift that is the changing nature of our own lives and of the path of humanity. We believe that revelation is not sealed, nothing is finished. We will grow and renew and become, and the future is yet to be built. We have a lifelong right and responsibility to make meaning from our experiences using science and reason, and then to change in light of those experiences. The second, justice. We believe that building a world of justice is one of the central calls of our human lives. This work may look different for each of us, but to be able to say at the end of a life that we help to further good in this world is an end, a spiritual and theological end unto itself. This work requires our time and our talents, and justice ultimately means liberation for all through the elimination of material, moral, psychological, and physical oppression. The third, community. We freely associate with each other, not bound by anything other than our deep conviction that spiritual journeys, and more broadly, human living, are best undertaken in the company of others who support and challenge and deepen us. Community, not individualism, is a sacred context in which our beings are forged and our work is accomplished. We believe that we must put the collective and common good above our own desires. The fourth stone, love. We believe that undergirding all things is an impulse to life, to creation, to being. We can rightly call this impulse love, an animating force of goodness and compassion. This love must be made manifest in our human living, and not simply for those who have always known its force, but ever more widely, ever more broadly. The work of love is the calling into community of every single being from every corner of existence. And finally, hope. No matter what befalls us, what challenge comes, there is always promise, always possibility. Our human capacity to make change, to create justice, to build community, and to live with love means that we cannot cower in the face of overwhelming odds. We instead embrace the truth that history and our own hearts teach us, that hope, actively embraced and lived, can transform us and this world we share. Change, justice, community, love, and hope. I believe that's who we are at our core. This is who I believe we can be moving forward into the future. This is what we have to offer the world, not theological uniformity, but uniformity of vision, shared purpose, shared desire to bend the arc toward justice, to fill the world with love, to create a community of embrace that holds each and every one of us. We cannot ignore the past. We cannot give up the lessons, the permanent wisdom of those who came before. But also we cannot stagnate. We must take stock of what is real all around us. And with our determination to grow, we must continue becoming. Who are we? That's today's question. Who are we? We are a people of faith, of passion, of purpose, of courage. We are a people who stay at the table, invite others in, and expand over and over our visions for the future. We are a people of change, of justice, of community, of hope, and of love. May we move into the future together, committed to our mutual becoming and to the transformation of the world. So may it be.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Please join us in the words for Extinguishing the Chalice. They can be found on your screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.